Welcome back, weebs and weeboos, to the channel Mission Doge, where today we're covering the newest Overwatch hero, Hazard. A brand new tank that has captured the hearts of many, considering that they seem to be received quite well so far. Most of you already know, but a quick rundown of what they actually do for those of you who don't. First up, they've got their Bone Spur shotgun. It shoots relatively slowly, just a bit slower than one shot every half a second, and it does at most 67.5 damage per shot, or 135 for a headshot. That is, if every pellet connects. It also has a unique shotgun spread, which I don't think any other weapon in the game has, where instead of spreading in a circle, it spreads in a sort of rectangle. This is cool, but I have to admit, this is one of my only nitpicks with the character. I've noticed because of the unique spread shape, the bullets actually tend to clump more in the corners of the spread rather than in the center, which sometimes means you actually do less damage for hitting in the center of your shotgun spread, which is kind of annoying. But moving on from that though, we have his wall climb. Yes, this is the first tank in the game to be able to wall climb, as well as the first non-Shimada character to be able to wall climb. Although I guess he doesn't have that Shimada power quite, because his wall climb only lasts a fifth of a second before it runs out. Still, that's long enough that you can get to most high places, and for those places you can't quite reach, there's a lot of workarounds. You'll see quite soon. Next up is his main tanking ability, Spike Guard. This is similar to Ramatra's block, where you take 4 times less damage from the front while using it. Only with Ramatra's block, the limit was that it was on your Nemesis form, so when Nemesis form ran out, you could no longer block. For Hazard, the block is on a resource meter similarly to D.Va's defense matrix, and it also has a bunch of extra benefits. While blocking, you'll automatically recharge ammo in your shotgun, but even better than that, anyone standing in the purple cone in front of you will have homing spikes fired at them from the back of your armor. These homing spikes each do 75 DPS total, and as well as that, the more targets that are in the AoE, the more spikes you shoot. So more targets won't split the damage, you'll just get even more spikes. This ability, thankfully, can even target things like immortality fields and healing pylons, which is really important. If it couldn't do that, it'd be a lot worse. The range of the homing spikes is very short, but they are very powerful. In fact, this is almost identical to Winston's Tesla cannon, which does 70 DPS, so the spikes actually do a little bit more than Winston can do, all while still being able to block. Next up is Hazard's main mobility tool, Violent Leap, which is really cool. At first might just seem like a Winston leap, but one that's kind of downgraded because it doesn't go anywhere near as far, but it does have a lot of cool movement tech. I'd love to get into it all here, but there's too much to cover in this video, especially because we've got other topics to cover. But it can be bunny hopped. You can do a tech to make it go further that's a little bit similar to the Doomfist Stair Slam tech from launch Overwatch 2. And there's even a lot of movement tech that isn't even really a bug or unintentional or tech really, more just nice little quirks of it. Like for instance, Violent Leap's most defining trait is that until you hit the ground, you will have the option to press the ability button again to do a slash with your sort of sword thing on your arm. The slash does 80 damage, so honestly not a whole lot, but it does have a lot of knockback. And when you go for the slash, it cancels your current momentum to change it. You'll shoot upwards a teeny bit, and you will move forwards at a slow pace. However, where forwards is can be whichever way you're facing. So that means that you can immediately turn into the other direction from where your leap went if you need to by turning around and slashing, cancelling all your forward momentum and turning it into backwards momentum. Or even sideways if you like. The last piece of movement tech with Violent Leap I will mention before I leave it alone is that you can actually refresh your wall climb with Violent Leap as well, so that you can wall climb, leap up, then wall climb again. Using these in combination, there's basically nowhere too tall for you to be able to reach, you just have to use your leap to get there. Next up is his Jagged Wall, a projectile that he shoots from his gun which once it attaches to a doorway or a wall or a floor, will grow a gigantic spike crystal out from where it lands. The spike crystal acts kinda like a May wall, only as one big object rather than a bunch of pillars. And unlike a May wall, the spikes actually damage and knock back enemies. It's only 40 damage, the same amount as a quick melee, so not a whole lot. But the knockback is actually pretty significant, so much so it's actually pretty feasible to use this to get people off the map. As you could guess, the uses of this get quite creative. The obvious use of using it as a May wall is pretty popular, but even then, it's much easier to break than a May wall. In generic situations, I find it's much more often used as a way to boop enemies, or as a way to give yourself cover in an area that otherwise wouldn't have any, so that you have a second of not getting shot at. But although it is spiked, the spikes don't affect you or your teammates, so you can use it as something to wall climb on top of, so that you can reach higher areas more easily. Lastly is his ultimate, Downpour. This is sort of like an earth shatter that sacrifices power for unavoidability. Whereas Earthshatter stuns people for 2.75 seconds and only works on people directly in front of you who don't have anything blocking your line of sight, Downpour goes a little bit further than an Earthshatter, and the thing that stuns the enemies instead comes from the sky. It's a rain of spiky crystals. And as well as that, they don't quite stun the enemies. They root them in place so that they can't move for 2.5 seconds, but they can still shoot and use abilities. The ultimate only does 90 damage, and it does have about a 1 second cast time, as well as the fact that the further away the target is, the longer it takes for the spikes to reach them, up to 1.6 seconds. However, the real kicker with this ability is the fact that it comes from the sky rather than the ground. This means it can go completely through walls, it also happens to ignore ceilings, and basically the only way you can stop this ult if you're caught in it is you can have some sort of projectile cancelling ability that you can aim upwards. Diva's Defense Matrix, Genji Deflect, any kind of shield, if you look upwards with that ability, as it hits you can save yourself. Though notably, Genji can't actually shoot the spikes back, he just makes sure he doesn't get pinned. And that is essentially Hazard's character. So, what do I think? Well, with this video, I think I'd like to sort of do a bit of a the good news is, the bad news is kind of format. But let's start with the good, because, hey, we don't do this often. Can we just celebrate a huge W for Overwatch for once? You know, this is part of the reason why my opinion on Overwatch can be so polarized sometimes, is because there are certainly some absolutely maddening repeating mistakes the devs continuously make and never seem to learn from, but by the same token, I do think it is kind of criminal how they literally never can get credit for doing anything right. And I don't think there's any better indication of the fact that all 3 of the heroes released this past year have been absolute home runs, and no one's talking about it. Venture has been one of the most fun, fair, well-designed DPSs ever added to this game, and honestly probably has become my favorite new DPS. But for whatever reason, no one talks about them. Doesn't even seem like that many people bother to play them, even though when I ask, almost everyone says they love them. Juno comes out, and she's a huge success. It's the first time we've actually had a healthily designed support in years. In fact, no, I'm not even selling it hard enough yet. Juno was the first time we got a healthy, well-designed support ever since Anna's release in 2016. That is a huge deal. And while a little bit more noise was made over that, even still, it seemed very self-contained, and it seemed drowned out about the complaints about Guna Watch. Not that I'm saying that that isn't a problem, but maybe, at least to me, it's not quite as important as the huge W sitting right there that no one wants to talk about. And now, here comes Hazard, another tank that has been basically universally well received. Everyone's having fun with him. He doesn't really seem to have anything that anyone thinks is unfair or annoying to deal with. He's an extremely skill-expressive, fun tank that doesn't bullshit you. So what am I getting at? Couldn't it just be 3 lucky breaks in a row? Well, no, I don't think so. You see, all the way back at launch, we had this sort of idea that an Overwatch 2 hero, what it meant to be an Overwatch 2 hero, was different from what it meant to be an Overwatch 1 hero. Whether you believe that was a good thing or a bad thing. But to be quite honest, with maybe the exception of just Kiriko, I don't really feel that way about Overwatch 2. In fact, it seemed that most of the new releases in Overwatch 2 were backlogs, most likely from Overwatch 1. Ramattra functions in 5v5, but definitely feels more like he was made for a 6v6 environment. And sure enough, there are plenty of unused voice lines left in the game that very heavily hint he was supposed to release in Overwatch 1, not Overwatch 2. Lifeweaver is another character that makes way more sense in a 6v6 format, and is kind of dumb in 5v5. I'm not saying he'd immediately be fixed in a 6v6 format. I still think he's a wonderful idea with absolutely garbage execution. And Alari in particular absolutely stunk of 6v6 double shield meta. Even if she never existed within it, it felt like she belonged in it. And we can't end this conversation without addressing the elephant in the room. Or the big Samoan in this case, Malga. I've seen so many people on the release of Hazard saying, I simply refuse to believe the same fucking brain-dead devs that made Malga somehow made this character, because of how much more fun and fair they are. And that is because Malga was not a character made for Overwatch 2. Many of you already know, but Malga was literally in the works before Sigma even released, and in fact Malga was supposed to take Sigma's release slot. That means that Malga's design is from 2018. No wonder he fucking sucks. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Malga was probably supposed to be their answer to some of the more negative implications of 6v6, where you can get stuck at chokes forever because of too many shields. I mean, doesn't that make sense for the all-offense, all-guns-blazing tank to make sense to break down an environment where you can never make it through a choke? But of course in 5v5 that's not really such a problem anymore, which means Mauga no longer makes sense. He's just a tank-farming tank in a single tank format. What I'm getting at is I have this inkling like Venture feels like they were probably the first character added in Overwatch 2 that was actually meant for Overwatch 2. And I can't help but notice just how much more fun and fair they are. And then I look at Juno, and then I look at Hazard, and yeah, I'll say it, I'm on the hopium pill. Because looking at these new characters, I see so many positive trends in their design that was desperately missing from a lot of the worst characters released towards the end of Overwatch 1's life. All three of these characters are highly skill expressive, but not in an exclusive way which scares you away from them. It's not too hard to understand what you're supposed to do on them, it's just the nuances of doing it that are quite complicated. Similarly to how Winston at first seems like the most basic tank in the game, but is actually considered by most to be one of the single most difficult tanks in the game because of how important it is to get the nuance right to succeed on Winston. That's why Winston's so well designed, because he isn't all that scary or complicated to pick up, but he's extremely difficult to master. And when you look at characters like Venture, Hazard, and Juno, I see that. Beyond this sort of easy entry cost but high skill ceiling, they all have a healthy mix of aim-intensive and not so aim-intensive mechanics. All three of these characters also have no crowd control abilities other than boots. But they don't have stuns, they don't have hinders, and even Hazard's ultimate only roots you but doesn't hard knock you down so you can still shoot and use abilities. The long and short of it is, none of these characters cheat you. None of these characters snap their fingers and delete your entire health bar from a mile away. None of these characters press a button and disable your entire character's capabilities and kill you before you can act back. Every single one of these characters allows you to fight back and wins if they are smarter than you. I know this might sound really low-level, basic stuff, but there are so many characters in this game which just don't follow that logic. These characters survive based on skill, and they are highly adaptable and multi-purpose in their kit. They don't get out-of-jail-free cards like Suzu's or Immortality Fields. They live for the most part through being evasive, not by having a gigantic health bar that regenerates faster than you can break it. I cannot drive home enough just how much of a monumental improvement in design quality the last three characters we've seen in this game are. And the main reason I'm excited is, this is what got me excited at the start of Overwatch 2. Back when it first started, a lot of these principles was what I was seeing in the balance patches. Now unfortunately, I would say that's not really the case anymore. I do think the quality of balance patches has taken a nosedive ever since Season 4 and has never really recovered. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I went back to being a bit doomer about the game, is because I saw so much potential in those first few months of Overwatch 2, and it felt like they just unlearned everything they'd learned about how to fix Overwatch within the space of about 5 months. But while I still have a lot of problems with the current balancing philosophy of the game, I am noticing a pattern that it's usually the same recurring issues, and it's usually past mistakes not getting fixes, rather than things in the future being stupid and bad. Don't get me wrong, that's not everything's going to be perfect. I still think Mauga's going to be a problem forever for this game, to be honest. Most likely Orisa will be too. Kiriko will continue to be extremely unfair and unfun to play against for the rest of time, whether or not she's terrible or not. And unfortunately, a lot of these mistakes can't really be undone. So that's kind of my main fear right now, that we've collected so many just absolute trash characters which just make the game worse with their existence because of how unhealthy their design fundamentally is. But looking at the characters that have been releasing ever since, that aren't just leftovers from Overwatch 1, they're looking good. They're looking like they've learned. Now with that said, are there any problems with the new sort of designs for Overwatch 2 heroes? Well, there is one thing, and I genuinely still can't figure out if this is a real issue or if this is me being nitpicky. To me, it feels like it depends on the context, but I can't tell if perhaps I'm just being a little bit biased and stuck in my ways. Essentially, I have this issue with, I guess, the purpose of the characters. It very much does feel like a lot of the times when characters are added to Overwatch, it's not like they consider what are the implications of adding this character to the game, what do we expect people will want to do with this character. It seems like they just make a cool kit that looks cool and fun to play, hopefully, and just throw it in there and then they deal with whatever mess they create by doing so. Which, yeah, It's not the worst approach, I guess. It can be fun and wacky, but it certainly leads to a lot of messes to clean up that often don't get cleaned up. Similarly, a lot of these designs I look at and I'm like, okay, I like this design overall, but the one question I'm asking is, what do you want us to do with this character? Like, what's the developer expectation of how this character will be used? Now, with Venture, this wasn't a huge problem. Using both their mobility and survivability, they're pretty useful in both dive and rush. Typically, it turned out they were actually more popular in rush when I expected they would be used more in dive, but that kind of does make sense. They aren't quite as fast as a Tracer or a Genji. But either way, they kind of stuck around as this sort of slower but stickier pressure on an enemy backline. You know, a Tracer obviously is probably a bit faster and a bit more threatening to an Ana in the back, but while that Tracer can be faster and more vicious than the Venture, if they do get surrounded, they're kind of screwed. Whereas Venture can always bail out if they have their burrow still, so long as they get to use it before they die. Juno had this issue in a more pronounced way, and Juno is where it started to bother me. Because Juno was clearly supposed to be the second Lucio, and don't get me wrong, we needed a second Lucio. The fact that speed was one of the most important mechanics in this game, especially for any rush team, but that Lucio was the only speed support in the game was honestly kind of psychotic, especially for this long. But the thing is, it's not just rush that likes speed. In fairness, rush needs speed like it needs life support. But dive also really likes having speed. It's mostly just poke that doesn't care about speed. And while Lucio is absolutely the irreplaceably crucial support for any rush team, he still works but doesn't quite as cleanly fit into a dive team. And so when I heard that Juno was being added as this sort of second Lucio, I was really hoping that they would be the dive variant of Lucio, essentially. They would be a Lucio more catered to supporting a dive comp than a rush comp. Which I suppose is technically what we did get, because it is true that Juno is more well-suited to a dive comp in most situations than Lucio was. That being said, though, it seemed that they couldn't break out of the old rush mindset, though. There's a lot of parts of Juno's kit that don't make sense if you're not running a rush comp. Especially her ultimate. Because of the fact it's such a small moving AoE, but it's so powerful if your team uses it, it gets exponentially stronger the more people clump up on top of it. But dive teams don't clump up. They split up and take angles from all directions, whereas rush teams do clump up. So, are you supposed to play her in rush? Isn't that kind of redundant, having Lucio for rush and Juno for rush and no one specifically made for dive? Worse still, the main way that Juno would stay alive if she didn't have another support to protect her was to run away, but for a lot of dive characters they could outrun her, so then the only thing she could do would be to use high ground. But if she needed to use high ground and camp it to be safe from the people hunting her down, she would need to be able to heal and do damage from range like Ana can, but she has severe damage and healing fall off. Not to mention, if she wants to camp high ground, that's kind of what a poke team does. You see what I'm saying? It's all over the place. We got parts of a kit that's supposed to work in dive, parts of a kit that's supposed to work in rush, parts of a kit that's supposed to work in poke, and it's like, what do you want to do with this hero? Like, I get it, you want to make another Lucio, and I think that's a good idea. But we should take some time to think about what should another Lucio be like. We don't want a redundant character, and we don't want a hodgepodge of a character that makes no sense. Now, thankfully in the end, Juno still found her place. Ana Juno was greedy, as you usually run Ana Brig in a dive comp so that the Brig could protect the Ana, and the Juno couldn't really do that. But it turned out the value of running both Ana and Juno together was so through the roof, it was worthwhile accepting that your backline was quite weak, because of the enormous reward you would get from having sleeps, antis, nano boosts, such powerful single target, infinite range healing, and speed boosts all in one team. But of course, that wasn't the main monster. The other support comp that made Juno go nuclear was of course Juno Brig, because with all the knockbacks that Brig could provide, she could give Juno just that little bit of extra distance so that she could stay out of other people's kill ranges. Meanwhile, Juno was capable of speeding Brig around so that she could either chase people down to kill them, or she could get out if she was stuck in a fight she was guaranteed to lose. Juno's synergies with other support kind of saved her, but definitely with certain support combos, Juno really is a sitting duck that doesn't function smoothly. Again, she's still a really good character, but I do think she could have been a bit better if they sat down and actually thought, what should Lucio 2 look like? And I'm not gonna lie, I don't get the impression they thought about it much. I get the impression they sort of just decided to have fun with it and see where it ended up. And again, we got a fun character in the end, but I can't help but think that maybe they could have been implemented just a little bit more smoothly. So I know that took a while, but circling this all the way back around to Hazard. Hazard has this same problem, but for Hazard, I do have to wonder if perhaps it's a positive. You see, I might go as far as to say that I feel that Hazard is almost a new category of tank, or at least subcategory. Most people are settling on the idea that Hazard is a dive tank. And I do think if you're going to try and cram him into the already existing categories, dive tank is probably the best one you can go with. Dive tanks are supposed to play a bit more split up to take angles, and they are supposed to typically target the enemy backline rather than the front line because they have less damage, but that doesn't matter if they can take out the supports first. As a result, every single dive tank in the game before Hazard had two qualities in common. For one, all of them were hyper-mobile characters that could go much faster than most of the rest of the cast, and for two, they all had the capabilities to reach high ground really easily. So that meant that supports couldn't just hide away from them on top of their towers. But the interesting part about this is that there's no hard rule saying a tank can't have one but not the other. You could theoretically have a tank that could easily reach high ground practically whenever they wanted, but they weren't honestly that fast. And I think that's what Hazard is. Don't get me wrong, is he more mobile than your typical tank? Yeah, but have you seen how fast his leap is? It's not really that fast and it doesn't go very far, and while it might have a short cooldown, I just don't think you can traverse a whole lot of distance with it. And considering that's his only mobility other than wall climb, which doesn't make him go faster, it just makes him go up, I would not count Hazard as a hyper-mobile tank, like every other dive tank. The only one who even comes close is, in fairness, D.Va isn't that fast with boosters, but I feel like that's compensated for the fact that boosters comes up every 4 seconds. It's an extremely short cooldown. Considering that I've just described that Hazard is like these other dive tanks, except they don't have something that's good, hypermobility, the implication is obviously they get a trade-off. They lose the hypermobility to get something good that most dive tanks don't have. The trade-off to me seems like it should be that Hazard should be better suited to brawl in enclosed spaces than most other dive tanks, right? I mean, while they're capable of it in most scenarios, characters like Winston and Doomfist aren't the best in tight enclosed spaces, and especially not Wrecking Ball, whereas the rest of the tanks really are. I mean, the only tank in the game that's really a lot like Hazard at the moment is D.Va, and D.Va fights in those tight enclosed spaces, right? So that's what Hazard should do, right? Well, that's just the thing. I feel like that's what he's supposed to do, but do I think he's actually very good at it? Yes and no. The way they go about making Hazard a quote-unquote brawlier dive tank is questionable in my opinion. And this is my main issue with Hazard. Although I still think he's a really good character, this can't help but irk me. You see, he's sort of like Ramatra. You know how it is on Ramatra? You're very hard to kill, especially if you just sit there in Nemesis form and hold block. If you're getting healing while holding block and you don't get stunned or antied, you basically cannot die. You are gaining health faster than the enemies can possibly take health off of you. And that's wonderful, except for the part where, are you really much of a threat as Ramatra yourself? Now don't get me wrong, can you kill people on Ramatra? Well, yeah, sure. But do you have real threat? Are people scared to even approach you? It's kind of not the case, really, is it? It takes 4 punches to kill anyone, assuming they get 0 healing, which takes quite a while. In Omnic form, you're even less of a threat, and Ravenous Vortex isn't really a very punishing CC ability, which is good technically, but it does mean that Ramatra lacks teeth. But he makes up for that in ridiculous survivability to an ungodly extent. Now for Ramatra that works because he's a rush tank. He's usually sitting on low ground in front of his supports in clear line of sight of them, and he's just taking the brunt of the damage. That makes sense. The thing is that Hazard's trying to do the same thing, but in a completely different context where it makes no sense. Hazard wants to jump into the enemy backline and then win up-close brawls because of the fact he's so much tankier and survivable than most of the people in those brawls. But again, without that kill power, it's hard for him to finish the job. And here's where the problems really start coming in. When Ramatra is trying to just outlast the punishment he's receiving, he's doing it down main. He's in the middle of the map in clear line of sight. When Hazard is trying to tank all the damage coming at him, he's trying to take an enemy angle. He's jumping into the enemy's space to take it from them. But that means you can't really guarantee that your supports can help you. And if your supports can't help you, then you're just buying time. You're not actually winning by blocking, you're just delaying the inevitable. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you can find ways to make it work. Sometimes you can find ways to take enemy angles from a perspective at which your supports can still safely see you and heal you while still occupying their own safe space. But for when enemies take a nasty angle that you can't do that for, that your only option is just to push in and take them off of it and accept that you're not going to get any support until the enemies are out of the way, you really don't have the teeth to get the job done, at least certainly not alone. Especially because you gotta remember that the literal most popular support of all time in this game, for good reason, is Ana. So you know what happens when you jump into an enemy backline as Hazard and you don't have support and all you have is block? You stand still and you give the Ana a free sleep dart and anti, and then you die. Well, you die unless you bail immediately, which is what I often do, but while that's at least better than dying, that does mean that you didn't succeed in taking the angle away from the enemies, and now they can continue to use that angle against you and your DPS and your supports to pick people off from a mile away, without you really having a chance to fight back. Now, with all that said, does this mean that Hazard can't work? Not at all. He can work. It's just the way he works feels a bit flimsy. You can place yourself on an enemy's angle and use your durability to slowly claw away from them. But it's a slow and painful process, and it's a process that sometimes never ends if you simply never get any help from your DPS and they don't agree to follow up on what you're doing. If the enemies have cooldowns to stop you, they will simply stop you every time. So you just have to whittle away their cooldowns slowly but surely, hoping eventually you can tear your way through there once they run out of cooldowns to keep stopping you. But that only works if you're not dead by the time they've unloaded every single ability they have into you. So yeah, as I alluded to, this does work wonders when your DPS participate. Because, of course, you get a bunch of people half dead, even if they're not dead. You force out a bunch of abilities that could have been used to kill your DPS, but instead were just used to stall you. And then if your DPS go in, they've got a buffet of easy targets to kill, all with none of their cooldowns available to bail them out. But again, that's assuming your DPS actually look and see, oh, the enemies are all shooting my tank, and they all use all their abilities, and they're all half health, and they all aren't looking at me, and I can just dash in there and cut them up. But again, if they don't notice that, then tough luck. Which brings me to the segment that I just can't hold back on anymore. I just have to talk about it. Hazard can't kill. Now I say that, again, Hazard racks up so many kills the second your team participates. But my god, the solo carry potential on Hazard? Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe it's just a skill issue, but I really feel like the solo carry potential on Hazard is practically in the toilet. You can do so much for your team, but if your team doesn't do anything for you, it doesn't matter. It's already true that part of the reason that tank is such a frustrating role is not only that you're the one that takes the most punishment and gets the most blame no matter how much you try to help your team, but another reason that I think is under-discussed as to why tank can be so maddening is that most tanks are, let's be real, cleverly designed to struggle to kill someone on their own. Almost every tank is good at hitting lots of people and getting them all half dead, but not really actually being able to finish them off. Though certainly there's a lot of variance in there. There's oddballs like Roadhog who are actually really good at getting kills on their own, and Orissa's certainly pretty good at it, and so is Zarya. There are, some exceptions. Hazard, though, I think is the epitome of that aspect of tank. That whole, wow, I can do so much damage, but I can't kill anything. His shotgun spread is absolutely awful, so you have to be at point-blank range to do any decent damage with it, and it's nearly impossible to connect every single pellet to the head. And even when you manage every pellet to the head, it's only 135 damage, meaning you need to get 2 perfect headshots in a row to actually be able to 2-tap anyone, and that's a best-case scenario that very rarely happens. Most of the time, you're looking at more 4 to 6 shots to actually finish off a squishy, even if they're in a tight enclosed space. That is, if you don't use the homing spikes. That's another thing that was kind of unintuitive about Hazard. It is true that technically he does a bit more DPS with a shotgun if you're literally perfect, but genuinely, the damage from his homing spikes is not far behind the DPS of his shotgun. And because his homing spikes are perfect auto-aim, and his shotgun is terrible at shooting in a straight line, that means, no joke, one of the first things I had to learn on this character is that unironically, a lot of the times, especially if someone was just jumped and they're just mashing random keys and they can't really predict where they're going because they're just panicking, it was genuinely more effective to try and kill them with a block than with my actual gun. Which was really weird and unintuitive to get my head around, but I have genuinely had so much more success ever since I stopped trying to kill people with just my shotgun and started using way more spikes. Blocking not even to actually block, but just shoot the spikes. Of course, the real sweet spot is to use a mix of both because of the fact you auto-reload your shotgun while blocking. But even still, I'm not gonna lie, if I could only pick one, I would pick the spikes, not the shotgun. There is one other situation where Hazard can get a kill on his own, which in fairness I think is supposed to be a solo carry potential, and that is if you wall someone off from their exit and trap them in a room, it is pretty easy to finish them off then. But you also have to remember that Hazard's wall has much less health than May's and doesn't have multiple sections, so even then, if they're a particularly high damage character, they can probably just break themselves free, or if they have teammates waiting at the doorway to bail them out. Not to mention what happens when you just get stuck on a map with no tight doorways to wall off. And don't get me wrong, I've complained about this before on other tanks, but ultimately lived with it. Especially when it comes to dive tanks. I mean, of course, they've sort of become my forte. Technically, Ana is still my most played character, but Ball and Winston really is where my heart lies. And those characters are like the face of not being able to kill as a tank. But even Ball and Winston, it's tedious, but they can do it on their own. Because while they also can easily be shut down by just a couple support cooldowns, they also have the mobility to continue to chase deep and catch targets with no support or tank cooldowns left to bail them out. In other words, yes, if you're a Winston and you jump a Lifeweaver, he probably doesn't die. Then you jump in again, and he probably doesn't die. Then you jump in again, and he probably doesn't die. But the fourth, the fifth time, he eventually will die. He'll just run out of buttons, and he'll run out of extra chances. Is it frustrating that you have to do that many attacks before they finally fall over? Yes. But can you actually win eventually? Yeah. Now you might see, how is that not the same for Hazard? Isn't Hazard also a dive tank? And he is, but remember, he's a different kind of dive tank. He doesn't have the speed to chase deep. He has more speed than an average tank, but he's still not very fast. And so even just something as basic as a Lifeweaver is usually more than capable of running circles around a Hazard so that they only get one chance to jump him. And if you don't kill him the first time, which usually you won't because everything will be thrown at him to bail him out, then you won't kill him at all. And I have to say, the current DPS meta does not help. It is hard Widow meta right now, and it is miserable. Not only because that means you often have a Widow on your team, who because they are a Widow and is a sniper and doesn't want to move, does not contribute to your dives and just sits off on the sidelines complaining about their teammates, while not really getting involved. You also have to deal with the opposite end of that if you ever go forward, your supports can't actually help you because if they peek, they're going to get their head blown off by the enemy Widow. And you want to go deal with the enemy Widow to help them with that, but you have to go deep to dive her. And every time you dive her, she gets all the support cooldowns in the world to bail her out. And if you had any follow-up, you could do something about that. But you don't, because again, your own team is running Widow too, and your other DPS is probably like a Torb or something. We've just been introduced to this hero, and already I'm so sick of having Widow Torb every other game, and just seeing that I am literally the only one attacking the enemies, and everyone else is hiding around a corner. And it's like, I get it, the characters you pick kind of force you to play by hiding around the corner, and you can't really just jump in here and fight with me as a Torb or a Widow. But maybe that's a sign we shouldn't be playing Torb and Widow. Yeah, right now, a lot of the DPS that people want to play are mostly DPS that both really don't help you out and really give you a tough time from the enemy team's perspective. So that has been the main thing that's driven me up on the wall on Hazard. In fact, I'll even admit it, while my win rate has certainly done a lot of recovering ever since, the first day that Hazard came out, I played 10 games in a row on him, lost all 10 of them. And every single one of those games, I was positive and the rest of my team was negative. And every single one of those games was either Widow Torb or Widow Cass. And I'm not kidding, the first game I came on the second day, I get a single Echo in my team. Not even like, you know, an Echo and another DPS. I get Widow Echo and the Widow doesn't contribute, but just the Echo helping out immediately stomped the first game I had a single DPS that actually got involved. So yeah, overall, yes, I do like Hazard, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I have the sanity to play this character as a consistent main or something like that, because as much as I love him, my god, I would actually tear my brain out from my head if I had to deal with this every single day. Though in fairness, maybe a lot of this just comes from forcing team comps where I have to run Hazard just because he's the new character. And maybe once he's part of the cast for a while and I only tend to play him when I do have dive DPS, I'll have a lot more fun with him more consistently. Which brings us to the big question. Will we turn on Hazard? Because, you know, people have actually learned a little, I think. You know, people have always had this thing I've noticed where when a new character comes out, they will love them no matter how terrible they are. I mean, I told you, back when Malga first came out, Don't know if you didn't realize, but people actually loved him practically universally when he was brand new. I barely saw anyone complaining about Mauga when he first released. And although I admit I did have fun with launch Mauga, I immediately looked at this character and was like, this is a bad design. This is not going to be healthy for the game. It seems though that people at least remembered how much people loved Mauga at first and how much they turned on him. And so now people can't help but wonder if Hazard will go the same route. If we love Hazard now, but give it a couple weeks and we're going to start hating this character. But I'm not going to lie, I feel like this is still pretty shallow analysis. Like, you've gone from 0 layers deep to 1 layer deep, you know? You've gone to, okay, switch brain off, brrrr, that feels good, this must be a cool tank, to, okay, we've made the mistake of being wrong before, let's just assume we're always wrong. I'm calling it now. This is what I think about Hazard. Considering that his kit has absolutely zero BS. No stuns, no insurmountable sustain that you just can't break through that makes him unkillable, no burst kills out of nowhere, no tank farming abilities. The only thing he even has that could even mildly be considered annoying potentially is of course the Mei Wall-like ability, but even then, it is less useful as a wall than Mei's Wall, as I've already mentioned, and more useful as a boop, or a sort of more creative way to edit the terrain for cover and things like that. So I'm pretty confident in saying I don't think that the opinion will change necessarily on how fun Hazard is to play as and against. But I'm not sure about playing with. You see, you know how I said that Hazard's really good at keeping himself alive, at least for a while, but he really struggles to kill up close. But one other thing I think you probably noticed is that this guy doesn't have, like, shields or, like, a bubble or anything like that for his teammates. So what I'm getting at is he basically can't peel for backline at all. He's just not enough of a threat up close to take out any immediate threats to your team quick enough to shut them down on his own without help from his DPS. And the best he can do to protect a support that's about to die is give them a wall. But then half the time they're going to panic and not even notice you gave them a wall anyway and run directly out into the line of fire. I know, it's happened quite a lot. Ultimately as Hazard, if someone is going for your backline, you can try to jump back to stop them, but you're going to lose basically every single time. You're going to lose space by jumping back and giving up the opportunity to take it from the enemies, and you're probably not even going to be able to bail out your supports anyway, and you probably won't even be able to kill whoever's diving them unless they're a low HP squishy. Whereas if you just keep pressuring the enemies, knowing that your supports can't really help you right now because they've got their own things going on, you can at least still maintain some space and keep some pressure up. But that's just the thing. That's kind of the number one thing that gets supports in random solo queue lobbies to flame you even for doing the right thing. When you find yourself in a situation where you can't help them, so the best you can do is maintain the front line as best you can, knowing that you're not going to get heals. But even then, he needs DPS to help him on the front line as well. He can't get solo kills for the most part, so he can't do anything alone. He needs to go in deep to do his job, taking angles from the enemies. When he gets the help he needs, though, he's a monster who makes his team's job an enjoyable breeze. If your team gets such oppressive map control because Hazard is able to clear the high ground and banish the enemy team to claustrophobic chokes, it makes it so much easier for the DPS to kill and limits the angles from which the supports can be attacked. So would people really hate him if the reward for pulling off a Hazard team is so great and benefits everyone so massively? Well, yeah. Because that's a bit complicated. That's a bit more going on than just babysitting your supports with a shield. And while you might think that people would appreciate the map control you're giving them, even if you're not giving them a shield all the time, unfortunately most randoms don't. And if you don't believe me, let me point something out. Do you know what other tank perfectly fits the entire description I've just laid out? Wrecking Ball. The bane of any bronze support player, and just about the most overhated tank in the entire game. Because to most people, at least their idea of what a tank is, Wrecking Ball isn't even a tank. To most people, they think of Wrecking Ball as an extremely selfish pick, which just completely bails on their backline, says goodbye to the rest of their team, and plays a completely different game in the enemy backline. Not realizing that Ball, when played well, often is clearing enormous amounts of areas of the map so that the enemies can't ever use high ground and that you always have it, as well as limiting the areas at which the enemies can actually attack you and taking a whole bunch of their resources and cooldowns just to chase him. Have you seen how ridiculously people will spam abilities into a Wrecking Ball trying to kill them? It's ironic because when you pick Wrecking Ball, you kind of make yourself the bane of everyone's existence, both the enemies and your own team. The entire enemy team will assemble to hunt you down and use all their abilities to make your life hell, and despite the fact that you're undergoing all that pressure for the sake of giving your team the opportunity to push forward and take space, they unfortunately often tend to just complain that they can't see you. They don't know what you're doing, they don't know they should be pushing in right now, and they don't understand why they don't have a shield in front of their face. Wrecking Ball has all the same qualities. He is really fun and really movement intensive, but he can't peel for backline, he's not enough of a threat up close to make any immediate threats go away, he needs people to help him on the front line to be especially effective, and he needs to go in deep to do his job. So you can see where this is going. I essentially think that unfortunately, the more toxic and frustrating and uncooperative teammates will essentially turn picking Hazard into the same sort of thing you get when you pick Wrecking Ball. Regardless of how well you do, you will be blamed by everyone on your team if you don't win, and if you do win, everyone will pretend it was despite you. Now, in fairness, do I think it will be as bad as with Wrecking Ball? I don't know. Wrecking Ball does have a particular reputation that I don't think he'll ever shake off, and Hazard doesn't have that attached to him yet. It's possible that it won't be as bad for Hazard, but certainly I do think you'll be a pretty ripe target for some pretty unwarranted criticism if you pick Hazard, I think. So in conclusion, I don't think it's right for our opinions to sour on Hazard. I do think he's extremely well designed, extremely fun, and in reality, very much a team player. The thing is, the way in which he's a team player is something that you actually have to engage with the game a bit to understand. And for those who are the kind to cry about not having a shield in front of their face 24/7, I think those kind of people are kind of going to ruin your fun as a Hazard. Unfortunately, time and time again, we've seen that the average Overwatch player kind of literally doesn't know what the job of a tank is. It's not necessarily to act there as a barrier between the enemies and everyone else. It is to make space. And the way that you make space is by taking angles. And the way that you take angles is by taking fights to take those angles from the enemies. But to someone who's looking to blame others for their own shortcomings, taking a fight is only ever interpreted as feeding, regardless of whether you survive the fight or whether you actually get anything off of the fight. I had one game in particular on Hazard where I went 31-2 on Nepal, and it was going so well because it was a game where both of my DPS were getting involved, and so everything was just so easy. I could just pick out a target, isolate them from the rest of their team, and have all my DPS jump on him and eat him alive. It was a great vibes game with basically everyone complimenting each other, except just one miserable little person playing Anna, who spent practically the entire match in the chat complaining about not getting any help from me, complaining about always being under pressure, complaining about the fact that the only reason I've got so many kills is because I've been healed so much apparently, and completely ignoring all the walls I gave her to try and save her life to instead run out into the line of fire and die immediately and blame me. I will of course keep in mind that that is not everyone. Everyone else in that lobby was having a great time and thought everyone else was doing a great job. It was just that one guy, and to be honest, the way they were playing, I'm pretty sure they're not a regular player and they probably have come back after months of not playing. That being said, there are always going to be people like that in a game like this, and they are always going to make your life just a little bit harder. With all that said, man, for all the complaints I do have, the quality of characters this past year has been such a major upgrade. And if they can keep this up going into the future, we really could be on the precipice of a renaissance for Overwatch. The player numbers have been ticking up. And I've got to say, one of the main things that's been bothering me is the lack of focus on story, and while we're definitely still not at the point we'd like to be, certainly for Hazard, we got a lot more cinematics and a lot more backstory than we've gotten for some other recent hero releases. I mean, Alari kind of just got plopped into the game with no fanfare, only got her origin story revealed a day after she'd already released, and even then her origin story was told through very much lower budget 2D animation in a very short time frame. Hazard, on the other hand, got a much more exciting looking cinematic and his own comic reading to explain his backstory. Again, it's not as good as the cinematics we used to have, but it's certainly starting to get back to that kind of quality. I could always be calling it too early, but I can't help but feel that it's practically inevitable that Overwatch has to have some sort of renaissance moment at some point. Maybe it's now, maybe it's years from now. But while many people feel burned by what happened in the past, I can't help but notice that the majority of the most dedicated Overwatch haters are hating on a version of the game that isn't even what it is anymore, or even what it has been for years. Though for as much as I don't want to put a damper on that hopeful note to end on, I do want to make sure to clarify just one thing. There's still a way this all falls apart again. We can't ignore the mistakes of the past for too long. We can't just leave the Maugers, the Widowmakers, and the Kirikos of this game to rot and tear away at all the good work we've done. Because at the end of the day, you could add 50 wonderful new characters to the game. But at the end of the day, if the strong characters are the poorly designed ones, if the strong characters are the ones with the most unfair, mind-melting mechanics, then it isn't going to matter a single bit. And while the meta can always shift, do you want a game where every time the meta shifts, there's a 50-50 chance it all goes to shit again? Or do you want a game that's consistently fun? I think that's one of the biggest problems plaguing Overwatch right now. And if we can overcome that, I think there's a bright future ahead. It's just whether we ever actually get there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.